morning, everyone. Welcome to the informational webinar on the Longwood Fellows Program. We're super excited that we have you this morning to learn more about our program, and I want to send out a special hello to Gina in Croatia. We got your message while we were waiting, and so it's lovely to hear from you, and welcome, and we're glad you're joining us this morning. So we wanted to take about 30 minutes and just give you an overview of the program itself, and also let you talk to and meet one of our former fellows. I think that's probably one of the most helpful things that someone who's interested in the program can do, is learn directly from someone who's been a fellow, so you can really understand what the program's like, what they do on a daily basis, what they're studying, and what the purpose of the program is. So you will have that opportunity shortly to talk to Patrick MacRae. Really quickly, just want to introduce you to Longwood Gardens. Longwood Gardens is the living legacy of Pierre S. Pont, and our aim is to inspire people through excellence in garden design, horticulture, education, and the arts. We were founded in 1906 by Pierre Pont. We are located in the Brandywine Valley, which is known as America's garden capital. So we're about 30-40 minutes south of Philadelphia, in a really lovely part of the country. Longwood has about, almost 1,100 acres. We have quite a large meadow, and we have 4 acres under glass. So that's a little bit about us. And I'd like to go ahead and introduce you to Patrick. And just before I do that, I wanted to underscore the purpose of the program, which I know you can see the text on the screen. We are a 13-month residential working and learning experience that further develops high-potential individuals' leadership skills while heightening self-awareness. So what does all that mean? We're really a leader development program for plant people. I think that's the most simplistic terms I can put it in. And we do that through really helping individuals become aware of their own style and leadership potential and abilities. So that's the one-sentence version of what the program is about, and I'd like to now introduce Patrick. So Patrick, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. Hi, everybody.
So, Patrick, can you just tell us quickly what you were doing before you came to the program? And I should say you were a fellow in 17-18, so you just completed the program this past June.
Yeah, it's amazing that even though I just finished in June, that it feels like I've been away from Longwood for a lifetime already, because I'm getting quickly into my new position here. Before I came to Longwood, I was at Cornell University for about 12 years. And I did my undergrad work there, I did my graduate work there, and then I worked there doing horticultural research management. So I had quite a bit of horticultural experience. I had garden management experience, but what I didn't really have was direct training related to leadership. And I knew that my interest and passion was really in the way that public gardens can connect people with the importance of horticulture. And so in order to have the kind of impact that I want to make in our industry, I was looking for opportunities to develop as a leader and as a professional and as a person in a way that just regular work experience wouldn't really do. And so I was trying to figure out what I could possibly do in that realm. And what it was at the time, the brand new Longwood Fellows Program came online, and I thought this is the exact perfect opportunity for the kind of development that I was looking for. And so I applied and was fortunate enough to be accepted into the program, and it was fantastic. And I'm sure we'll go into more details about how it's impacted my career now that I'm beyond the program, but it's certainly very impactful.
That's great to hear. Thank you. So how would you begin to describe that experience for individuals who, like yourself, 18 months ago, really didn't have a good sense of what the program was about?
It was kind of interesting for my cohort in particular, because we were the first group to go through the program. And so we were really jumping with blind faith and you know, hoping that that Longwood's reputation was would sort of live up to Longwood's reputation. And for me, you know, I wanted to make sure that whatever program I went into would provide both content around how botanic gardens are run and what it means to be a botanic garden or a public garden, and what it means to lead in that kind of realm. But also I wanted to have an opportunity for personal reflection about my own leadership style and strategy, and an opportunity to really understand not just how to manage a botanic garden or a public garden, but how to be a leader and how to identify your own strengths as a leader. And so that's what I was looking for, and I luckily found it.
So can you just really quick talk about your understanding of the difference between being a manager versus a leader? And then my second follow-up question to that is, did the program live up to what you were hoping for?
Yeah, sure. I think that, excuse me, I think that managers are, this is kind of I should have an easy answer to this because I think we talked about this like constantly throughout the 13 months of the Fellows Program, but it's sort of an ambiguous concept, the difference between leadership and management. And I think that managers are kind of tactical, operational sorts of people that are getting things done on a day-to-day basis, and leaders are kind of developing strategy and figuring out how to implement a strategy and then sort of passing that along to management. But I think leaders and managers can and often are the same people. It's just two different skill sets that they're using. And so you sometimes are wearing your manager hat and sometimes you're wearing your leader hat, and sometimes you're wearing them at the exact same time. But I do think that they're different concepts. And you can be a fantastic manager but not be a very good leader, and you can be a really good leader but may not be able to be that good of a manager. So I think it's best to be able to develop your skills in both. I don't know if that makes sense.
That's perfect. Yeah, that sounds exactly right, and how I would describe it. So, do you think the program lived up to your expectations?
I think the program blew my expectations out of the water, to be honest. Excuse me, again, coming into the program and not really quite knowing what, you know, there hadn't been a track record developed yet, because we were the first group. I was very hopeful that I would have you know, great career opportunities and that it would be a fantastic networking opportunity. But I left the program not only with all of that, an incredible network that I didn't have before, a really deep understanding and appreciation for the role of public gardens and how to lead in a public garden, but also one of the things that I think is really special and that I didn't anticipate or expect in any way is that when you spend 13 months at Longwood, you become a part of this incredible community of people that is Longwood Gardens. And it's something that I think carries with you throughout your entire career. And the people that I met at Longwood and know through Longwood, it's like an enormous family. And so I think that that's that sense of community and that incredibly strong professional network is something that I didn't expect and that I'm incredibly thankful for. And so in that way and many other ways, the program really exceeded my expectations.
That's great. I know we're going to talk about the different components of the program here in just a second, but I want to ask you, mentoring is one of the components. So who was your mentor and what was that experience like?
I was very fortunate. My mentor was Paul Redman, the CEO of Longwood. And that was an incredibly rewarding experience because one of the, I think, brilliant things about the program is that you're paired up with a mentor based on your own development needs and interests and what it is that you want to do with your career. And so I expressed interest in board relations and I expressed interest in strategic planning. And those happen to be two things that Paul Redman is absolutely expert in doing. And he was kind enough to take me on as a mentee, which I think is so generous. And that's another thing about Longwood, is that everybody at Longwood is willing to put their time and effort into helping us develop as professionals. And so working with Paul was so rewarding, and I learned so much from him in a way that excuse me, in a way that I can't really begin to express. And I think the best way to pay Longwood back for that kind of experience is to just pay it forward and to do what everybody at Longwood is doing, which is just helping to cultivate the next people coming on. But Paul is such a fantastically talented leader. And so spending time with him, any amount of time, but the amount of time that I got to spend with him was fantastic, and a really incredible opportunity for me to learn. And he's not a lecturer. He's kind of, he asks you a lot of questions and leads you to help develop an understanding of who you are and what you value and what you need. And he's a good listener, and that's what a mentor is all about, is helping you to, encourage your own development. And actually, Paul and I have kept in touch since I left Longwood, and I just saw him last week. I was there visiting, and he spent almost 2 hours with me. So it's not a relationship that just ends when you leave the program either, which is so special.
Fantastic. Good. Patrick, can you tell us what a typical day looks like when you were here?
I think this is such a funny question, because there's so much variety in the program that it's hard to describe what a typical day is. I think the program is intense, and there's a lot of very active learning, but there's also plenty of time for self-reflection. And so in a typical day, you might be visiting another garden in the region and meeting with their CEO or their head of horticulture or some other leader on their team. You may be coming back to Longwood in the afternoon and working on your Cohort Project, which is a project that you work on throughout the 13 months with your fellows. And then in the evening, you might be hosting a dinner with other regional leaders and learning from them. And then late into the night, you might be reflecting and journaling and thinking about what happened that day. And then the next day, it might be a little bit more quiet, and it might be more individual, working experience. And you might be spending time working with one of the departments at Longwood to get a more in-depth understanding of their operations. So it's incredibly varied. It's quite intense, but very, very doable. I think it's not intense in the way that like an academic program is intense, where you're reading constantly and you're writing constantly. It's much more experiential.
Great, that's great. So one really important question for you is, what are you doing now after the program? Can you tell us a little bit about your current position?
I am, I think I'm on my 7th or 8th week now as the Director of Public Programs and Education at the Garden Conservancy, which is a nonprofit that operates across the United States to save and share outstanding American gardens. And as my role as the Director of Public Programs, I lead the nation's only National Garden Visiting Scheme. It's sort of like, I don't know if we have any attendees from the UK, but it's sort of like I'm forgetting the name of it, the National Garden Scheme in England, where basically we identify private gardens and open them and share them with the public on select days throughout the year. And I lead a national speaker series, and I do all sorts of other sort of educational programming to teach people about the value of gardens and gardening, and it's an incredibly exciting position. And I think the potential for impact and to encourage people to care about gardens and horticulture is really huge. And it's, I really seriously believe that the Longwood Fellows Program is what allowed me to be considered for a position like this. To think that like 15 months ago, I was doing what I was doing, and now I'm leading a national program. That just, it blows me away still. I can't quite believe it.
Well, we're absolutely thrilled for you, Patrick, and you certainly deserve that position, and I know you'll do great things. So
Well,
congratulations.
thanks, Tamara.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on to talk about some of the components of the program. I know Patrick has mentioned several, but just to make sure that you have a really good understanding of what those components are, I'll explain them briefly. Patrick mentioned that uh, we don't spend the majority of our time doing intensely academic work, and he's absolutely right. In fact, we only spend about 25% of our time studying and reading. And when we're studying and reading, we're doing so in the disciplines of leadership from a theoretical perspective, but also from a practical perspective. We're also studying board relations and governance, leadership communications, human resources, volunteer management, finance. There's a whole host of topics really intended to provide an individual with a broad overview of what it's like to manage in a public horticulture environment. So that's kind of the curricular component. Also, as a part of that component, we provide for individualized, tailored learning experiences. So we realize that everyone comes to our program with different backgrounds, different experiences, different needs. And so we want to be able to allow people to customize a portion of that curricular experience. And we set aside about $8,500 per fellow to do that. So that's a considerable sum, I believe, when we're talking about specialized curriculum, in addition to all the other topics that you're introduced to while you're here at Longwood. So the second part of the program is something called cultural and regional immersion, and that has many kind of facets to it as well. One of the things that we do during that time is we visit some of the many, many garden leaders that we have in this area to learn directly from their experiences. Mentoring is also a part of that component, and Patrick mentioned that his mentor was Longwood's president and CEO, Paul Redman. Another aspect of that component is a departmental immersion. So we don't do rotations through the garden here at Longwood, but instead we go into one or perhaps two departments and go really deep into a strategic project. And the fellows work side by side with that department to execute tasks. And all of those tasks are directly related to our strategic plan. So that's a pretty exciting piece of that as well. We also, the fellows host weekly catered dinners for thought leaders. And I think I'm not speaking out of turn when I say last year's cohort found that to be immensely helpful. So they are introduced to these individuals either through their own connections, through their own efforts, or through someone that they meet or someone here at Longwood. And they're really, the goal of that is to have these individuals over for dinner and learn from them and ask them questions and have a pretty structured conversation. Not formal, but they certainly know what areas they would like to talk to these individuals about before that dinner occurs. And at the same time, they're building their network, which is really, I think, important as well. Final component of that piece of the program is something that we call salons. So a salon style discussion where, again, we get to go out, we meet regional leaders, we learn directly from them, we build that network, and we try to do that as frequently as we can because, as I mentioned early on, we're very fortunate in this area to have about 32 gardens in a 30-mile radius. So, and everyone in public horticulture industry, at least so far, my experience is very generous and giving, and so these people are quite willing to share their experiences. The third piece of the program is a 2-month field placement, and so again, fellows have the opportunity to go to another garden to work on a project that really supports their learning needs, but also at the same time helps the garden achieve some of their strategic goals. We have placement partners both in the U.S., from Florida to California, and kind of many points in between, as well as a number of international partners. So, for example, Patrick spent his field placement in the UK at Watson Manor last year, which is one of the Rothschild properties and is part of the National Trust. And he works directly with their leadership team on several different initiatives. We also have partner gardens in France and Singapore and China, and we're always looking to continue to build those relationships around the world for the benefit of both the fellows' experience, but also to help the gardens and to contribute in some kind of meaningful way there. The final piece of the program is a cohort project, and I think Patrick mentioned this. It's a 13-month collective effort that the fellows participate in, and they generate project ideas and topics at the American Public Gardens Association conference in June and refine those topics. And the entire intention behind that project is to create something that speaks to and really helps the broader public horticulture industry. So this year, Patrick's cohort, he and his three colleagues created a guide and toolkit for new and emerging gardens. And that guide and toolkit is online. It can be found both on the Longwood Fellows site as well as on the American Public Gardens site. And Patrick, I don't think I've shared this good news with you, but I checked the other day, and APGA's site, that toolkit has gotten 238 unique views. So congratulations to you and your colleagues.
Oh, that's fantastic.
It is. It's great. It's also been downloaded 31 times from Longwood's site. So congratulations.
Great.
So that's a little bit about the various components of the program. And now I'll spend just a minute or two talking about what it is we're looking for. So what is this ideal fellow? You know, we're really looking for someone who is committed to excellence. Excellence is one of Longwood's values. We want someone who will come in and work hard to go on to better the public horticulture industry. I think someone who's intrinsically motivated, naturally curious, has a great rapport with others, good interpersonal skills, and I specifically mentioned that one because the Longwood Fellows Program is a residential program. So not only are you working with your colleagues, you're also living with them as well. And that can be a rather intense experience if you're coming from a situation where you haven't had a roommate in quite a number of years. So there's that component to it as well. We're looking for someone who really wants to work for the greater good, and in large part that's for, as I mentioned, the public horticulture industry. We welcome people from a wide variety of backgrounds, so you don't necessarily have to have a particular degree in a particular subject. What we really ask for is an individual with a bachelor's degree, somehow related to public horticulture, and 5 years of experience. And the reason for having the 5 years of experience is because the content that we study it needs to be contextualized. So we're not like an MBA program where you go and you learn strictly from theoretical perspective, but instead we really want you to have that 5 years of experience so you can contextualize a lot of what it is we're talking about when we refer to leadership and organizational behavior and so forth. We're certainly always looking for people who want to continue to develop themselves and others. And as Patrick, I'm sure, can attest, that's something that all good leaders do, is never stop learning and never stop seeking to develop the people around you. So those are some of the specifics about what it is we're looking for in the ideal fellow. And Patrick, is there anything you think I didn't either emphasize or I overlooked in that?
I think I think that the really important pieces here, especially, are the intellectual curiosity and the really deep desire to make a difference and to have an impact in your career and to do something big for the greater good for public horticulture. So yeah, I mean, you hit those, but I just think that those are particularly important.
Okay, thank you. So now I think we'd like to open it up for questions if anyone has any questions. I have a colleague with me, Abby, who will be fielding those. And so while those continue to come in, I will go ahead and review with you a couple of key dates. Applications opened on August 1st, and they closed on October 1st, at the end of the day on the 1st. Individuals can also be nominated, so if there's someone in the field of horticulture who really believes there's a deserving individual, they can simply nominate them through a letter to me, and then that triggers the process to start. Those nominees do have to go through the same application process, so it's important to begin that early. We're looking to have in-person interviews December 5th through the 7th, and that experience really involves getting to know the other individuals who will be here interviewing for the program, participating in some collaborative problem-solving activities, and then, of course, interviewing one-on-one with the selection committee. It is a committee of 7 people, and they are comprised of individuals from around the world in public horticulture and in leadership. Then we hope to make our authors the individuals to join our next cohort by mid-December, with the eye on starting our program in June, which is very, very exciting. So I'll pause there just for a second to ask Abby if there are any questions.
Yes, we have a question from Allison, and this is for you, Patrick. Allison says, can you give examples on how you were empowered as a leader? And what are some examples of the deliverables that you implemented or developed in this leadership role?
I think that one of the really interesting aspects of the Fellows Program is the opportunity to act as a leader within your cohort. So each of us, each of the 4 people in my cohort were and are strong personalities and strong leaders, and so we had to kind of maneuver together and navigate together how we would actually work together when all of us were wanting, and it's sort of our natural inclination to take charge and lead the process. And so I think figuring out how to work in that realm was really interesting, and it was an intense and fantastic and sometimes frustrating and incredibly rewarding in the end process to work with your colleagues in that kind of way. And I think it's a really applicable in the real world because, of course, when you're leading a team of people, you're not going to be dictating to them what to do. You're going to be building them up and working with them and trying to develop the strength of the team through its individual people. And so that's one example. And the deliverable, of course, was our large cohort project, which I think we're all very proud of. Yeah, I think that's probably the best example that I can think of right off the top of my head. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Patrick. Our next question comes from Lucy, and this is for Tamara. How competitive is the application review process, and what is the acceptance rate?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's pretty competitive. I can give you some numbers from both the first year and the second year. The first year we had about 66 applicants. From those 66 applications, I narrowed it down to about 32 and sent it to the committee of 7. There's a rubric we use that's based on the criteria that I just shared with you a few moments ago. So the committee will go ahead and review all the written materials, and then we decide who to bring in. We typically bring in 10 individuals for a 2-day experience, and then it's from there that we select our 5. The application rates depend on the number of applications we get from year to year. Last year we had fewer applications, but they were more qualified individuals, and I think that's simply because the first year the program was new, and so we were trying to adequately communicate what the program was about. So last year we had 32 applications, and again we selected 5 individuals from that pool. And 21 of those applications to the committee for review. Does that answer your question, Lucy?
Lucy says yes, so thank you, Tamara. And she has a follow-up question to that, and this would be for either of you. What type of experience was it, or how do you explain having to work with people with different personalities and different communications types?
That's an excellent question. Patrick, do you want to go ahead and answer that?
I think that's a really great question, and I honestly think that that's one of the most valuable parts of the Fellows Program is working with people who are different from you. My professional experience before the Fellows Program was largely isolated. I was doing a lot of research and a lot of writing, and I didn't have a whole lot of opportunity to work with very different people. The people I did work with were, by and large, Ivy League educated researchers, and so that's just one demographic. And coming to the Fellows Program and not only working with but living with my colleagues really helped to open up my perspective and my frame of reference. And I don't always agree with them, and certainly there are opportunities for there to be disagreements and healthy arguments and things like that about everything from living together to working together. But that's so important and so valuable. And as I've left the program, and particularly now as I'm working for an organization that shares private gardens for the public, I'm remembering back on many of the conversations that I had with some of my colleagues who come from backgrounds where community is much more important than what it was from my background, and that's really influencing how I lead the development of my program. Thinking about the fact that yes, we're opening private gardens, but we need to make that a democratic process and an open process and break down barriers. And these are things that are part of what have become, I think, the collective values of my entire cohort. And so those are deeply influenced by the opportunity to work with other people who come from a different background. So yeah, a very good question.
And I would add to that, Lucy, that we do spend a fair amount of time shortly after the program starts as a cohort off-site, getting to know one another, and developing team and group norms and expectations for how you are going to live together and work together. We also do some personality assessments in the form of the Big Five, which is the most valid assessment that's on the market right now, specifically for leaders. So we are aware of the fact that that can be a big transition for people, and so we want to acknowledge that and start the cohort off on the right foot.
Great, thank you, Tamara. What are the living arrangements, and are you allowed to have guests?
Yes, you are allowed to have guests, and the Fellows actually have their own residence. It's called Holly Hill, and it is directly across from Longwood's Meadow. It's about, half a mile from the garden entrance, the business entrance. And each fellow has their own room, the private room, private accommodation. And usually it's a shared bathroom situation, but there's also plenty of space in the house to find your own niche, if you will. There's also entertaining space for the weekly dinners. There's also a formal living room, a basement, kitchen, and a classroom. We do hold a number of our classes actually at the Fellows residence.
Tamara, we will give another minute or so and see if we have any other last-minute questions.
In the meantime, I would say if you have specific questions for me that you would like to speak to me about, please don't hesitate to send me an email, tfleming@longwoodgardens.org, or you're welcome to call me at 610-388-5230. Happy to talk anytime. And if you need a little bit of guidance for the application process, I'd be happy to do that as well. And I offer that to everyone who's interested in the program.
And after the webinar, you will receive a follow-up email that will have Tamara's contact information for any other last-minute questions. We have another question from Gina. This is a question for Patrick. Patrick, has your view of public horticulture changed after the program?
Oh, absolutely. I think that I have a much more comprehensive understanding of what it means to be a public garden, and what, a much more in-depth knowledge of the diversity of public gardens. And I think that my feeling on the role of public gardens in contributing to the vitality of a community has changed and grown, and I think that I came into horticulture with a real interest in beautiful gardens and beautiful places and the aesthetic power of a fantastic garden, and I now have a much deeper appreciation for the community value of gardens and how gardens really change people's lives. So absolutely, I think that's yes, for sure.
Thank you, Patrick. Our next question is, and this would be for either Tamara or Patrick, do most fellows come into the program knowing what type of role they want afterwards?
Gosh, I know how I would answer that, Patrick. How would you answer that?
I would say not necessarily. I did, and I still do, but I think that I think it's important to have a sense that you want to lead and that you want to make a difference and an impact. The particular channels that you go through to make that impact, I think are fluid, and so I think it's actually good to have a sense of what you want to do with your career, but then be open to figuring out the different ways to make that happen. And that's what I've done. My long-term goal is to be an executive director of a great garden, but I'm now working in an education space, which I didn't anticipate, and which is very rewarding and very exciting. So I think that just having an open mind is what it's all about.
Yeah, I would agree completely. And just reflecting on both the first cohort and the second one now, is that people, some do have a clear idea, just like Patrick did, but others don't. They just know they want that leadership role. And it's fun for me to kind of watch their thinking evolve over the course of the 13 months. People do change pretty drastically in the fields that they're interested in sometimes.
Great, thank you, Tamara. Patrick, what was your favorite part of the program?
I'm trying to keep my dog from barking. So I think one of my very favorite parts was the field placement, the international field placement. I was at Waddesdon Manor in the UK, which is a very interesting organization. And I loved the network that I built there. I loved the cultural experience. But then coming back to Longwood, and particularly as I move forward in my career at my new organization, I'm really realizing the benefit and the value of having had that experience. The opportunity to go to a different organization other than Longwood and learn about their processes in ways, it's impactful in ways that you don't realize until you've gone out and started to do other things in your career. So I think that was a really valuable experience and a really fun one too. And I've made friends who I'm sure will be lifelong friends, and it's helped to develop my international network, and it's just a really amazing part of the program.
Thank you, Patrick.
So, and as Patrick mentioned, the field placement is, I think, one of a huge benefit of the program. And in addition to that, fellows receive a monthly stipend. They have housing, of course. There's a full Longwood benefits package, and their field placement is paid for accommodation and travel and so forth. And I mentioned too earlier that there's that $8,500 flexible curriculum piece that fellows can choose to apply how they wish, how they wish. Other questions?
I would also just say that if anybody has more questions for me that they don't want to ask here, there's not time for, feel free to get in touch with me. Maybe LinkedIn might be the best way, or you can feel free to email me. It's pmacrae, MACRAE, at gardenconservancy.org. And I don't know, Tamara, if we can share that information, but I'm happy to do whatever I can to answer questions and to be of service to you as you go through the process.
Thank you, Patrick. Yeah, we'll be sure to include that in our follow-up email. Okay. Well, thank you all very much. And again, please reach out with specific questions, or if you'd just like to discuss the program, that would be great. I hope we answered your questions today. And Patrick, thank you so much for taking time out of your morning to join us. I really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Okay. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.